Is it time to get much tougher on foreign criminals? Well, today, the Tories will table an amendment to the government's immigration legislation that would require all foreign criminals to be deported, including anyone charged with or convicted of an immigration offence. But is this enough? Let's face it, the immigration lawyers wouldn't let these people be kicked out anyway, and astonishing new data has laid bare the true extent to which migrants from other countries commit crime. Between 2021 and 2023 alone, a staggering 104,000 foreign criminals were convicted in England and Wales. That includes over 38,000 violent, sexual, drug and theft offences. Foreign nationals were convicted of sex offences at a rate 71% higher than Brits. The worst offenders? Afghanistan, Eritrea, Namibia, Chad and Moldova, as you can see on your screens there. The Afghans, an astonishing 22 times more likely to commit sexual offences as opposed to Brits. Here's today's big question. Is it time to limit or even ban altogether visas from specific countries? Well, we can now speak with our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, ahead of the debate I'm about to have, this is being discussed in Parliament today. The Tories acting tough on immigration. Some might say 14 years too late. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, many would say that. Yesterday on your show, Chris Philp broke the news that the Tories are looking to force Labour to vote against an annual cap on net legal migration. Today they've turned their attention to the issue of foreign prisoners. Now, currently they can't be deported back to the country they came from if they're sentenced to less than a year in jail. That will end if the Tories win at the next election. An amendment to the border bill they're pushing today to remove that threshold. They also want to end the exemptions that mean you can't be deported under the European Convention on Human Rights. That applies to all foreign nationals, even those seeking asylum and anyone charged or convicted of immigration offences. This has set all the usual suspects off. You've got the Refugee Action Group there saying this is ludicrously unworkable and a blatant political grandstanding, and it would demand that people fleeing war zones could be returned to those war zones, according to campaigners. Even though they would have their human rights rights may have disappeared. So there's other areas too from this Tory opposition. They want to stop issuing visas to countries that don't take back citizens by amending Section 24 of the Immigration Act 1971. So Kevin Badenoch is turning her fire on the government on immigration, in a sense clearing up the mess they caused over 14 years. And that's an issue picked up by Nigel Farage, the Reform UK leader, battling his own problems internally with Rupert Lowe. He's the former Reform UK MP. He says this is shameless posturing by a Tory party that was responsible for one of the biggest political failures in modern political British history, for which they should never be forgiven. He says these issues are only around because of Tory failures over 14 years. And before I go, Martin, just to remind you, on illegal arrivals, that has not gone away. The figures now are startling. Between the 1st of January this year and the 9th of March this week, 4,131 people arrived here illegally. That is a record for the past 8 years, surpassing 3,358 for the same period in 2024 and less, 3,250 the previous year, and so it goes on. The small boats response from this government is not working. That is being seen by the data. The Tories are on the case. The problem is they won't be in power for 4 years, and Labour behind me, the Downing Street behind me, they've got 4 years to get this right. They say they can do with their returns programme and working more closely with enforcement bodies on the continent. We'll wait and see.
Lots of great ideas, Chris Hope. Lots of ideas they could have implemented when they were in power and did not. But thanks for bringing us up to speed there, Chris Hope, live from Downing Street. Now, let's take this to a debate now. Is it the right thing to do to look at the League Nation of international offenders and think about, well, we've got a serious problem here. What is going on? First of all, let's speak with the social policy analyst, Dr. Reid. Hassan. Reid, always a pleasure to have your company. You and I have been looking at this data earlier on, the list of countries, particularly with sex offences: Afghanistan, Eritrea, Namibia, Chad. These are countries ostensibly from the Middle East, from Africa. They're culturally very distant to our own. What's going on with nations like this? What is it that's driving a seeming propensity, a proven propensity, to be more misogynistic, to commit more sex crime? What is it about these nations?
Well, there's parts of the world where the prevailing social and cultural norms, especially when it comes to women's rights, the protection of women and girls, they're fundamentally different to the prevailing social and cultural norms here in the UK. And I've always said that is something that should be reflected in our immigration system. Now, when we have these debates on immigration, a lot of it is focused on the economics. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely think that it's very important that migrants contribute in a positive sense when it comes to economics. And I think that all too often we've seen that many waves of migration, they've generally been lowly skilled, low wage. They're certainly not attracting the brightest and the best from an economic perspective. But I think that when it comes to social, political, cultural and legal norms, the compatibility on those fronts, I think that that's also very important to have when it comes to a functioning and effective immigration system.
Reid, there are 87 nationalities with a higher conviction rate for sex offences than Britain versus the British population. Of the 25 nationalities with the highest sexual offence conviction rates, we awarded over 53,000 visas to people from those countries, where they're higher than Brits, all 87. We issued over 500,000 visas to these nations. Now, Reid, nobody is saying that everybody from Afghanistan or Eritrea or any of these nations is a sex offender, but the data is the data. Is there a case, do you think, of using this as a framework for some kind of effective immigration policy? How about we limit or strictly vet anybody coming from any of these countries?
I'm a strong supporter of data-driven policy, and you have to look at the patterns of association here. I also think that this is something that's reflected when it comes to the ongoing small boats emergency on the English South Coast. Much of that migration is ultimately young, unattached males originating from parts of the world which have very different attitudes towards women and girls. This is the end result, unfortunately. And I think that if you continue to persist with what I consider to be a ridiculously lax immigration policy, we certainly don't have a rigorous and selective immigration system, then that poses very serious problems from a law and order perspective.
Reid, always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you for coming on and talking total common sense today. Let's continue this conversation now, speaking with a Labour activist, Aisha Ali Khan. Aisha, welcome to the show. You no doubt overheard that debate. The facts are the facts. The facts aren't racist. The facts tell us we have a serious problem with a number of countries who are committing a large amount of sex crimes, of violent crimes, and the countries tend to be the same as those we see in other nations, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Germany. The patterns are consistent. So on that basis, are we importing cultural differences which are leading to crimes, and therefore should we be limiting the visas to those, say, for example, from Afghanistan, Eritrea or Namibia?
First of all, Martin, I completely accept that these numbers do not look good. Obviously, it's worrying as somebody who's been campaigning against violence against women and girls, especially sexual violence. I'm concerned about these figures. But what I'm concerned about also is that using these figures to justify the idea that we can limit people to come here, I feel that it's wrong to label an entire country as, sexual deviants or violent offenders.
Okay.
And I think what we have to do is look at it on a case-by-case example.
No.
And
All
if we are finding men, if we are seeing a vast number of men that are coming here, from countries...
Aisha, please, it's too late to look at things on a case-by-case basis because they'll be in the country and then we can't deport them. The law is toothless. We don't have a returns agreement with half of these countries, and then it's a problem we are literally stuck with at the taxpayer's expense forever. My point point is quite simple. Nobody's saying everyone from these countries is a problem in waiting, but you could say, for example, if you're from one of these nations, there should be a very, very vigorous vetting process before you're allowed in. If you don't meet those thresholds, then you shouldn't be allowed in the first place. So that's not racist. It's protecting Britain's women, something the left used to care about.
Look, Martin, I mean, this whole weekend we've had International Women's Day. We've been campaigning about Afghani women and their rights. If we literally put a ban against anybody from Afghanistan coming to the UK, we're also limiting women from coming here. And we're actually, they need to escape Afghanistan.
It's not Afghani women that are raping British women and end up in jail. It's Afghani men.
Martin, the proposals are to limit people from coming from these countries. I mean, of course, if you're saying limit men from coming,
it's one option.
The men from these countries from coming, that's a different debate altogether. But we cannot literally label every single person from each of these countries as potential sexual deviants and potential sexual criminals.
Aisha, do you think, can I ask you a question? Do you think that the political left has a serious blind spot on this issue? Because you're so afraid of appearing racist, you're so afraid of appearing Islamophobic, you won't look at the data and say, we've got a serious problem.
Martin, I don't accept that because I obviously have very left views, but I've been campaigning not just about this issue, but look at the grooming gangs. I was talking about this topic 25, 30 years ago. I was talking about it when nobody else was willing to even put their head above the parapet. And I was willing to say, put my neck on the line and actually say, this is an issue that we need to tackle. So it's not just political. I mean, if we actually want to really make a difference, let's look at the mindset of these men that are coming here. And it's not just the men that are coming here, it's also the men that are already in this country. It's British men as well. Let's look at the mindset, the misogyny, the attitudes towards women, and let's start dismantling those and working towards getting rid of those. And then obviously harsher prison sentences. And I actually don't mind the policy of deporting because obviously if you come to this country, like I obviously...
Yeah, but Aisha, we have to leave it there. But I'm afraid my point remains we can't deport Afghanis, we can't deport Syrians, we can't deport Iraqis because they're not deemed safe countries by human rights lawyers, and so we are stuck with the problem ad infinitum. But look, thanks for joining us, Aisha Ali Khan. Always a pleasure. Now, government spokesman said this: we are committed to delivering justice for victims and safer streets for our communities. Any foreign nationals who commit heinous crimes should be in no doubt that we will do everything to make sure they are not free on Britain's streets, including removal from the UK at the earliest possible opportunity. Now,